We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 138. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Paul Zimmerman. Today we discuss digital nomadism, if that's a word, and how archaeologists were the first digital nomads. I'm going to argue that. Let's get to it. All right, so if you are perchance watching this on YouTube, then great. We are recording in Zencastr like we always do, but the new Zencastr beta. If you're listening to this as an audio podcast, head over to YouTube, look down in the show notes. I don't even remember what the Archaeology Podcast Network YouTube channel is called. Probably youtube.com/archpodnet, hopefully, but possibly a string of random numbers. Who knows? I'll find that link and I'll put it in the show notes. But hopefully you've clicked on that and you're watching this on YouTube. We've never done this before. As I'm recording this, I have no idea what it's going to look like. I see Paul in a big window and myself in a small window, but I think there's a composite that you're looking at right now, hopefully. So we're just going to try this out. For the audio listeners, just keep on pressing on, and we're gonna record this. But I think we're gonna try to possibly do some video stuff like this because there's a large segment of the population that likes to consume media on YouTube, even if it's just podcasts, even if there's not a whole lot going on. I think Joe Rogan, made that abundantly clear.
Yeah, I don't think we have any song and dance routine, any video, any thing that we're going to display on screen. So this one will translate just fine into a podcast, I think. That's right.
I don't even think I can share my screen. Like even if we had something to show, I don't see any way to actually do that on here. So
you're right.
Yeah, unless I somehow just held something up in front of the camera. I don't know, but I don't think I can actually present something because that's not what this is for. This is just to watch us do a podcast. So hopefully that's entertaining to somebody. Anyway, kind of fits though, because going through new frontiers is what this podcast is all about, new digital frontiers. And what I wanted to talk about today, as I mentioned in the introduction, is basically digital nomads. So as followers of this show probably know, my wife and I moved into an RV a few months ago. We technically moved in full time at the beginning of September. We're recording right now on September 24th or 3rd or whatever it is, 24th. Technically right at the beginning of the month, because we spent the last 3 months of August getting rid of all our stuff. And I'll tell you how freeing that is. We didn't put it in storage. To be honest, we put some stuff in a very small storage unit in Reno, which I hope to decimate over time as we go back to Reno once a year in the late spring, because we have to go through there for various reasons. But I hope to get rid of those remaining items that we just couldn't get rid of. But all our furniture, a lot of personal items, clothing, just a lot of stuff was just donated, sold, or pitched. And it was just, we tried to throw away as little as possible, just being conscious of that. But we did sell a bunch of stuff on Craigslist. We had a friends come over and just take things. So I'm like, listen, I don't care. It's yours. Have it. I got my use out of it. I don't need to nickel and dime these things. And now we're in our RV. So I feel like I need to explain my background for those of you that are watching on the video. I'm in a hotel room because we're finishing up this project. Our RV is actually about an hour away at this RV park in the middle of nowhere. And internet is a real challenge out there, which is what I want to talk about today. And I think I've solved most of the problems. So if we were to do this again, we wouldn't have this problem again, but we're still having issues. And since most of the crew's been dismissed, it's just my wife out there tidying up some roads today and yesterday that we need to record. So we got a hotel room. Plus it was her birthday on Monday. So we came to the big city of Elko, Nevada to have a fancy dinner and decided to just get a hotel for the week. And then we're leaving on Friday to get back into our RV and head back out. So that's where I'm at. Paul, where are you at today?
As I've mentioned before, I work in New York City and we spend a lot of time here. But we also have a place up an hour north of the city in Brewster, New York. And so since the middle of March, when all this happened, we've been living up there. And I prefer living up there because I go a little stir crazy if I don't have a workbench and a yard to mow. And we have that there, and I don't have any space for a workbench or a yard to mow here in the city. But since school has resumed, I'm coming in 2 days a week. So every Thursday and Friday, I'm here on site because we have things that you have to deal with physically. There's some networking issues that you have to actually pull wires and do stuff. And there's always break fix. Kid drops the laptop, you got to replace the screen. So we've been cycling around so there aren't too many of us in the office at any one time, and so that we can be distributed amongst different buildings. And Thursdays and Fridays are my days to be in the city. So now I'm back actually in the apartment in the city, and we kind of have the opposite problem in the apartment right now from what you're having, in that my sister-in-law just moved out of her house and needed a little extra storage space for some furniture and various other things. And since this apartment was sitting empty right next to hers, she moved stuff here. So I'm going to apologize for the bad quality. I've got a decent enough background, but I've got two big windows right over there, no other lighting over this way. And any other place I move this camera around, you're going to see a mattress or piles of blankets and all sorts of stuff. This here is a shot that looks relatively clean, but it means that this side of my face is in deep shadow. That's probably an advantage for anybody looking to me on video. Could you just put your whole face in shadow?
Yeah, just pull those blinds if you wouldn't mind. No, I've got a surprisingly good lighting situation here. There's no lights on in this room right now. This is natural light coming in from a big window that's right in front of me. So it's not too bad. So, but that is, that's all about being a digital nomad, depending on what you do, whether it's archaeology or I do a lot of podcasting and editing and stuff like that. If we're going to get into this video thing more and more, I'm probably going to bring my light. I've got a light that suction cups off the back of my laptop when I'm doing lots of Zoom calls and stuff. I usually use that in the RV sometimes because depending on the time of day, whether it's cloudy out, it might just be a little weird and shadowy and dark. And usually when I'm with clients, where we have the Zoom, we have the cameras on in a lot of cases, and you need to look presentable, right? So I've got those lights, and that's, again, just part of the digital nomad kit, whatever that means for you. And as I mentioned, living in the RV, this is something that's been definitely on my mind because we wouldn't be able to do this lifestyle. We're not rich, right? We're not independently wealthy. We didn't retire. I don't have a pile of money sitting in a bank somewhere. Living in an RV is actually cheaper than you would imagine. And as long as we can get our townhouse rented within the next couple of months, so we don't burn through that savings bank too quickly. Because right now we're paying the RV payment and the mortgage payment. And we've been doing that for 3 months now. And that's getting a little tight. But as long as we can get that rented, and my agent assures me that, she's got some good leads, and hopefully by October 1st, that'll be done. But fingers crossed. Either way, I know. I figure worst case scenario, if nobody's rented it by the end of December, that'll be 2 years that we've owned it, and we can easily sell it without doing the whole capital gains thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know a whole lot about that, but I know you have to wait 2 years, and January is 2 years. So that's our kind of fallback plan. We can last until then. But the point is, to be able to do this, I need massive internet connectivity. Not only do I just need to be connected to the internet, but I need good internet because through my other work and through podcasting, I need heavy bandwidth use. Like, for example, what was it? We switched AT&T plans just a couple of months ago because I was taking a look, and we were on something where that's our primary carrier, right? And we've got 2 phones and an iPad with a data plan. And I think our total cost on that, now that our phones are paid off, is like $168 a month or something like that after taxes, which isn't very bad. And we had the 30 gigs of data with rollover, and that's shared amongst those 3 devices. And that also wasn't that big a deal. And also you don't get charged for going over the data. You just get throttled, right? The minute you hit 30 gigabytes, you get throttled down to something unusable. And it's not good enough for Zoom calls. It's not good enough for anything. No. So I switched plans because they had basically a 50 gig plan before throttling with no rollover. Mm-hmm. But the throttling after 50 gigs only takes place if the network is busy. Basically, you get deprioritized if you're over your 50 gigs. And the joke's on AT&T because we've been up in the middle of nowhere, and I'm pretty sure we've been the only ones on this tower for the last 3.5 weeks. Because I checked our plan and we've used over 190 gigabytes this month. Wow. and it's been great. It's been great. I've been using my iPad for Zoom calls and stuff. The only downside to that plan is each device has a 15 gigabyte tethering limit before it throttles to 128 kilobits per second. Yeah. So, but the joke is on AT&T because I was tethering to my computer. That went real fast. And then I used up my phone's tethering because I started with my iPad. Then I used my phone's tethering and I hit that real fast. And then I used up all my wife's tethering. And she wasn't really tethering to any devices, so it wasn't that big a deal. But we used 45 gigabytes in the first week, right? And that was done.
Yeah.
But I just started doing everything on my iPad Pro. I've got a 12.9 inch iPad Pro. It doesn't have to tether because it's got its own data plan, and I can do Zoom calls on it. I can do Teams calls on it. I can post podcasts. I can video edit. When we do our YouTube videos, I've been doing them on my computer and then airdropping the file to my iPad and then uploading it to YouTube with my iPad. And it's been game changing, absolutely game changing, being able to do that. And it's been such a good option for us that, I've been considering replacing my laptop with something a little more powerful in the next couple months here. But I'm actually just kind of considering getting this super beefed up iPad Pro, like the brand new one. Then we'll have 2 iPad Pros, both on a data plan and both very capable of doing things. And, the one I would get would have a 1 terabyte hard drive. So I'd be able to store a bunch of stuff in there because access to Dropbox is not very consistent either. And I usually do everything in Dropbox. The beefed up iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard and the pencil is about $2,000. But the beefed up MacBook Pro that I want to get is about $4,500. So I'm like, do I need the extra horsepower that the Mac would give me, or do I need the flexibility that the iPad would give me? Which one do I actually need there? And again, this is definitely a digital nomad conversation, because you've got to think, what are we doing with all these things? As archaeologists, we're just in the field here. I've got 3 different companies, 3 different crews working within WildNote, and WildNote is just the software, right? You need devices. You need to be able to sync. There's text going back and forth in the field. So people had devices where we're having conversations. That's all part of the game. So I don't know.
Well, you're leading off talking about, and this is what you led off when we were discussing this beforehand, talking about internet connectivity. Is that for you the most important part that allows one to be a digital nomad in 2020, or is it one component of a suite of things that are happening?
I think it's honestly the key component, because it's second only to power. Right? Because the ability to charge and maintain charges on all your devices obviously is probably the first component there. And that's not as easy a problem to solve as you would think, right? Because I've had people come out here on this project that have never done digital site recording before. And I said, bring a battery. Bring a battery. I didn't know, even if you've got a brand new phone, if you're using it all day and you're running the GPS and you're just tanking that battery down hardcore. And if it's hot out and it's been pretty warm during the days, cold in the mornings and nights, but warm during the days, that's the desert, right? You get a 50-degree temperature swing. And that also will not preserve the battery very well. If it's a colder day, you might be able to go all day on a brand new device without charging the battery. But on warmer days, it just drops it through the floor. So I said, bring a battery, and half the people did not bring a battery. So they're running into those concerns. And then, to be honest, they're archaeologists. So most of them have a phone that's 4 or 5 years old already and probably only lasts 2 hours on a charge. So, without heavy use.
Battery's already on its last legs.
Yeah, exactly. It's been through like 800 charge cycles already. So I think if we're speaking realistically, part of being a digital nomad is the ability to charge up your devices. One of the things that we're looking at for our RV right now, we've spent a lot of time in RV parks, and we have a 50 amp service on our RV, which means we can run both of our air conditioners, the refrigerator, and the microwave at the same time, right? That's pretty nice to have. And we can charge up whatever we want. We actually plug our car charger in, because we've got a hybrid plug-in car now, and we plug that into the RV, and we can charge our car off the RV, which is kind of a wild concept. So that's nice, but we want to do a lot more boondocking when we get into the Southwest next fall or next spring when we leave North Carolina. But in order to be able to do that, we're probably going to have to replace the house batteries, because the house batteries, while great, we're just going to need lithium, and we're going to need solar on the roof. That will give us the ability to not run the generator. The generator gives us 40 amps of power, but you can get 40, 50, 60 amps of power with a roof full of solar and lithium batteries, and do it all without a generator. So that would be pretty sweet. That's like a $5,000 investment, but when you start adding up park fees and stuff, you might pay $1,000 a month to stay in a park, so who knows?
If it doesn't balance off the cost, at least it's going to bring it down to something more manageable. It'll offset a bunch of it.
And increase the resale value, to be honest, because one of the other components of digital nomadism, I would say, would be, especially if you're doing a lot of work in the field, would be a place to do that work. And that's been another challenge for me in the RV. I recently just bought basically a camping dining table that's pretty robust, because I've had some camping tables, but most of those, they fold out in a way that you can't even get your legs under it. You can't even get in there, but I just bought this big table, so I have a place to work. But I've got some other ideas that we might talk about in the second segment for increasing my podcasting and office ability.
All right. Well, I'm just going to drop this here before we move on to that next segment. Is that I just saw yesterday, it made me think of you on my news feed on Google News. Came up, there was an article, I didn't read it, but the headline was that so many people are buying RVs now that the designers are redesigning them with specific office features for people, I guess, like you. So that makes me wonder if, you're not unique doing this. Apparently, a lot of people are doing this or seriously considering doing this. And back to the question about your internet access, I wonder if the cell companies start making certain packages that are more amenable or targeted in various ways to people who are doing this mobile RV lifestyle and need that internet access to do their Zoom calls, to get to their work databases, so on and so forth.
Well, let me tell you about RVs and cell phone internet when we get back on the next segment, because I have got a solution to the cell phone thing. And I think Elon Musk has got a solution that's going to leave them by the wayside. But then also, we just bought this RV 3 months ago, and I've been looking at new ones. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in the next segment. Back in a minute. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code Archaeotech. That's ARCHAEOTECH.
Get 15% off a set of BrakeMess Select, Select Pro, or Import Direct brake pads and 2 rotors now at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
College Savings Iowa is now iSave 529, and it can do more than take your child to college. It's their passport to a bright future, because funds can be used for K-12 tuition, trade schools, graduate degrees, books, and everything they need to get anywhere they want to go. Register by September 30th at iowa529contest.com for a chance to win a $5,290 contribution. iSave 529, for every child, for any adventure.
All right, welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 138, video edition for the first time. Again, if you are not following the video on this, click the link in the show notes. Hopefully, I have it up on our YouTube channel. I don't know if that's going to happen, but hopefully it's there. Mm-hmm. And you can stop listening to the audio if you happen to be at home or something and throw us up on YouTube. So you can see our ugly mugs up on the screen here. We're literally doing nothing. There's nothing to see here, folks. I'm telling you that right now. So
yeah. He's holding a microphone. I'm smirking and nodding my head every now and then. And that's the limit of it. High interactivity here, folks.
I like that there's still in this interface that you guys can't see, even when we're just doing the audio, there's a little hand that you can click that actually raises so you can indicate that you have a question. Because normally when we're recording, we don't have any visual cues for each other. And that really helps out to let me know that when I'm on some monologue that, Paul's got an interjection to make. And you can still do that on this one. But the funny thing is, couldn't you just hold up your actual hand?
I do that 1,000 times a day on the Zoom calls when we're doing tech support. Yeah. And this is my favorite one.
Time out.
Time out. Stop. I know enough. You've told me enough. Let's fix it now.
Right.
I know it's awful. I know you're upset. You told me what the problem is. Let's work on fixing it.
There you go. All right. So let's get back to internet access, because again, we talked about power. I think that really is number one, because if you don't solve power, none of the other stuff works, right? So the next one is internet access, though, because pretty much everything that we do, needs to go somewhere, right? Even if you're recording GIS data in a Trimble, that has to be uploaded to a server so somebody can process that and somebody can do something with it, right? We're using WildNote in the field. It doesn't matter what you're using. You could be using iAuditor, Tapforms. I mean, honestly, the Esri products, it doesn't collector. It doesn't matter what you're using. It has to go somewhere, and it does that via the internet typically, right?
Right.
So internet access. One of the things I've learned is that, we've been staying in a lot of RV parks and things like that. And you might be staying in a hotel like I am now. You might be staying at a campground when you're working, something like that. And a lot of places these days, hotels for sure, campgrounds maybe, RV parks, yes, almost every time, have internet. But guess what? They're not paying for great internet, and you're sharing that internet with 400 other people. So don't expect to do anything on it. Even if you're sitting right next to the router, the chances of you being able to stream Netflix, stream YouTube, or really do anything with video is probably not going to happen. I've been able to record podcasts audio only. I'm not sure how. I mean, we're doing this particular one. Paul, I assume your internet's pretty decent at home, but I'm on probably the best hotel Wi-Fi I've ever been on because I paid for a little bit extra. They had that option. But that being said, it's still not the best Wi-Fi I've ever seen, but it's allowing us to do this. So the point of all this is you're not going to be able to rely on Wi-Fi. And you really, if you're a true digital nomad and you're moving around the country and you're doing things, you're staying connected, you need to have a consistent solution. And right now, there's only two ways that you can get a consistent solution. One of them is satellite, which is uber expensive. And the other one is cellular. And the grandfathered in cellular data plans that are truly unlimited with no throttling are few and far between. I've heard people in the RV community talking about it, in the boating community talking about it. They've got these golden unicorn Verizon and AT&T plans that are truly unlimited with no data limits. And as long as you don't change your plan, they'll let you keep it. So if you have one of those plans, don't get rid of that plan. Get another phone and pay for an additional plan before you get rid of this one. Okay. I'm just saying.
My wife used to have one of those plans, and we actually pulled her off of it. She was upset. She wasn't she wasn't using much at all, but because with me and my kids on the same plan, bringing her in actually bumped up because my kids were constantly going over their limit. And so that allowed us as a family to actually use our plan sensibly and not keep on running into overages. But it meant that she had to give up one of those golden unicorn plans.
That's tough. Yeah. So one of the solutions that we found, and I'll link to this in the show notes, and I'm going to say this right now, it wasn't cheap, but it's called the PepLink Max Transit Duo. And PepLink actually has a lot of different devices. And if you go to their website, you can see a bunch of different things that might suit your needs. What this one is, and not only did we get this, which you can use independently, but we also got the antenna that mounts to the roof of our RV. Okay. So what this actually does is it allows us to put 4 SIM cards within this router, 4 cellular phone plan SIM cards within this one router, and read Wi-Fi. And not only does it read Wi-Fi, but it will pick up weak Wi-Fi signals and enhance them as best it can. You're still enhancing a crappy signal that is being shared by 400 people, but at least maybe you're picking up Wi-Fi when you weren't picking it up before. And then within its interface, which is basically you open up a web browser when you're connected to the signal that you're putting out, and you type in one of those URLs that's like 192.168. whatever, and you get into the admin controls of it just like you would any normal router. And you can set the preference, which is super cool. You can move down your preferences from 1 to 5 priorities, I think, and say, well, if I'm picking up the Wi-Fi, here it is. You can put a minimum signal strength on it. It says, I only want to use this if I'm hitting this much decibels on it or this much signal strength. And then for your cellular plans, like if you have some that, will start charging you, if you like a lot of the Verizon plans and stuff will charge you $10 a gigabyte if you go over your limit. So you can set a limit in the device. And again, they say in there that it's not perfect. Like, what they record and what Verizon records might be 2 different things. So if your limit's 30 gigabytes, maybe set it at like 27 gigabytes in the device, and it will stop using that until you can set a limit. And you can also set the date that it resets. So you can set the limit, and then it will start using it again when it passes the date that your data limit resets. So what we've done is I tried to take the SIM card. I didn't know much about this stuff. I tried to take the SIM card out of my iPad and put it in that device, my AT&T SIM card. And that did not fly because each SIM card has an ID number and it's the ICC ID number or whatever it is. And the device has a device type, which is the IMEI number. And to get it to work, I actually had to call AT&T. I gave him all this information and the woman was like, wait a minute, is this going into a router? And I was like, yes. And she's like, you can't do that. You need a router plan. This isn't a router plan. This is an iPad plan. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, that sucks. So I've looked into AT&T and they don't have a good solution for us yet. I think we're just going to continue with AT&T on the iPad for now and on our phones, of course. But what I did do is T-Mobile combined with Sprint, and they actually have a pretty decent data-only SIM card plan. And I took that SIM card and tossed it in. I think I'm getting 30 or 40 gigabytes a month unthrottled. I don't think they throttle you at all. And as a matter of fact, I don't think there's a limit now that I'm thinking about it. I'm paying like $60 a month for that plan. And it says there's no limit because T-Mobile is always trying to scramble for customers. So they'll basically give away data, right? Yeah. So, and we've had some good success with that. Although where we've been the last 3 weeks, I'm right on the edge. I can see the signal, but it's not actually it's not good enough to actually connect to it, which is super annoying. And then we've got a Verizon MiFi device that I actually did, since that is a router, basically it's a mobile router. I took the card out of that, stuck it in the router, and that's working. That's actually working. So now we're going back and forth when we get into a signal between Wi-Fi, if we're picking it up, and T-Mobile and Verizon, and it's switching automatically to whatever's stronger. So that's pretty cool. And I think for most true digital nomads, cellular is the most affordable way to go. And if you can get a company to pay for it, that's even better, which I can't yet. So cellular is costing me, close to $300 a month right now, just for my cellular data plans. But I write it off as a business expense because I can. I know not everybody can do that, but cellular is basically the way to go on that. I don't know.
Yeah, cellular is fascinating to me. I've got a little anecdote for you here because, cellular started out telephones and then became data. So yes. My first time, I'm wearing my Yemen shirt today because yesterday driving into the city, I was behind a Mercedes wagon that had a great big Yemen flag on the back of it. Nice. So the first time I was in Yemen was in 94, working on a project in Western Yemen, Hadramaut, where I'm actually doing my dissertation research. And in 94, we were there for 4 months. Every Friday, which is a Sabbath in Muslim countries, we would go from the village that we were in to the next bigger town, about 20 minutes away. On the outskirts of that town, there was a phone center. If we're lucky, it was open. If we're really lucky, they could get a line back to the capital. If we're extra lucky, they would get a line from the capital back to the U.S. And if you just got everything working perfect for you, one of us in our team would actually be able to talk to our families back home. 10 years later, I was in Yemen again, and I was walking down the street of the same next bigger city over, and my cell phone went off, and it was my wife calling me saying, she was pregnant at the time. She said, I think the baby's going to come a little early. Get on the next flight home you can. And that was still before, that was 2004, right? So cellular data really took off after that, especially with the first iPhone. Right. I mean, it existed before that with trios and whatnot, but the iPhone is what propelled that. And so it's amazing to me in that span of 10 years, we went from cell phones are an absolute luxury that you can only use in, tethered to your car in a major city, to just, walking around because everybody had it and we were all texting messages amongst each other to coordinate with our friends. And 10 years after that, it's just expected that you have data that you can stream movies on. And now, we're even farther than that. And we've got 5G on the horizon, which is going to be a game changer. And so it's my perspective on the connectivity of being a nomad. My nomadic lifestyle in my 20s and early 30s changed dramatically because of the better batteries, but also more so what you were saying before, the internet connectivity. I mean, actually, that last time I was in that city to get internet, I made a deal. I was staying in a hotel, and I made a deal with the guy that lived right next door to the hotel, and he would drop a phone line out his window at night so I could plug it into the side of my PowerBook and connect so I can send emails to my wife.
Nice. I was in Africa about the same time, 2005, and I was in Tanzania and Kenya, and it was in October, and I called my mom on her birthday with a buddy's cell phone, because I didn't have one. I didn't even have a cell phone at the time. Not one I could bring to Africa anyway. I think I did have a cell phone, but not one I brought to Africa. But this guy that I was with, he had a cell phone, and he let me make a call. It wasn't cheap. I ended up paying him like $20 because it was like super expensive to make that call. But I called her from Olduvai Gorge, and I was standing at the Homo habilis site.
Oh, wonderful.
And I called my mom on her birthday to wish her a happy birthday, because that's where we happened to be. And then with the time zones and all that stuff, that's how it worked out. And I ended up finding out that, the reason that time frame, I don't know when it started. You were there 2004. I was there 2005. It was right around. And then I don't know if it was the governments that got together or, some sort of aid groups or something like that. But cell phones blew up in that country because they didn't have an infrastructure before that to handle landlines. Like they didn't have any connectivity, right? Like you were saying, but cell phones were easy because there was a tower. I could see it from our camp, from the Leakey camp at Olduvai Gorge. There was a tower that was powered by solar panels right there. And they could put up this huge infrastructure in minutes.
Yeah, the tower that I was connected to was on top of a cliff that overlooked that original phone shop that we'd go to. Exactly. And that's a good segue, because that leads me into what I'm hearing a lot of chatter about in the RV and boating community, which is Starlink. Starlink is Elon Musk's idea for bringing internet to the world. And he's starting with the U.S., basically North America, the U.S. and Canada, of course, because that's where we're at. But the ultimate idea is to put up about 40,000 satellites into low Earth orbit. And low Earth orbit, in order to not interfere with other communications satellites, the International Space Station, stuff that's up a little higher, but also, their lifespan, when they're at their expected lifespan, they can deorbit themselves and then burn up in the atmosphere, right? They're small enough that they're not going to turn into like little missiles and kill somebody, but they'll burn up in the atmosphere when they purposely deorbit, or if something malfunctions, they're low enough that they'll deorbit pretty much immediately. And because they've got a little bit of rocket fuel on board, and they've got to maintain a certain altitude, and they'll do those orbital corrections every once in a while. But of course, that's going to run out. Nobody's going to resupply it, and it's going to burn up into the atmosphere. But they're cheap enough that it's expected for that to happen. So, but the Starlink, he's talking, there's no pricing, there's no anything on the internet, but the chatter is that it's going to be ridiculously affordable internet like you're paying for right now in your home, except it's satellite. And I don't know what the speeds are going to be. I can't imagine Elon Musk would even do it if it wasn't going to be broadband type data speeds. I don't think it's going to be 5G, but I think it's going to be at least LTE type quality like we're getting now, like 4G LTE type of quality. Otherwise, why would you even do it? Nobody's going to pay for, crappy internet from the satellite. So that's just super intriguing. And 2020 is when it's supposed to come online, 2021 is when it's supposed to come online for North America. And I'm going to be looking at it pretty hard as a solution, because switching between towers, and we want to go off in the middle of nowhere with our RV, with our water tanks and our black and gray tank capacities. And then if we put lithium and solar on board, we can stay out for weeks. As long as we have enough food, we could stay out for weeks literally in the middle of nowhere, and still have broadband connectivity and be able to work. I can't even imagine that. That would just be so incredibly amazing and awesome to just wake up, look out and see a desert or mountain landscape or something like that, and yet still be able to do my work during the day, because as I said, I'm not independently wealthy. I can't just do that whenever I want. I still got to pay the bills. So that, I think, is the ultimate solution, is satellite internet, like satellite everything else, or a better cell phone internet structure, infrastructure, just like Africa has. To say that we're behind Africa in a cell phone infrastructure is something, you know what I mean? It's a little mind blowing, but you're right. It is because they didn't have that intermediary, the copper lines everywhere to fall back on, or to displace, because it was sunk cost. And in the US, they just weren't compelled to replace something that was working with something new and untested. Other places where they didn't have anything better, anything working to fall back on, how many full speed ahead.
how many people in this country, you probably have it too. How many people in this country still have a landline just because it bundled with their cable? You know what I mean?
I did up until a couple months ago. I'm like, why are we still paying the extra? Now it's not an advertised plan, but I had to call them. I had to call Xfinity to find out what plan I could get. It was basically my same plan minus the phone because I don't use the landline.
Yeah.
Nobody's used the landline. We get sales calls. We get calls from our state rep, and we get, for town hall meetings coming up, and we get incoherent calls from my aging father-in-law who's got dementia. We don't use the landline. Right. So we got rid of that and saved $30 a month on our cable plan, which is still hellaciously overpriced. Save $30 is $30.
Well, there you go. There you go. All right. Well, let's come back in segment 3 and talk about the third component of what I think is really high quality digital nomadism and really embracing this lifestyle. We talked about power. We talked about internet. The next one is going to be your mobile office. Where are you doing all this work? Let's talk about that in segment 3. You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show. All right, welcome back to segment 3 of episode 138 of the Archaeotech podcast. And we're talking about being digital nomads in 2020 here. And we've talked about 2 components of the 3 that I think really make up a digital nomad, although the third one is a little bit subjective. But the first one, of course, power. You can't be a digital anything without electricity or batteries or something, which is all electricity. The second one is internet connectivity, because typically whatever you're doing needs to go out to somewhere for you to make money and make a living and do your thing, whether that's archaeological data, your blog or your YouTube channel, whatever you're doing to, keep your lifestyle rolling. Even if it's just looking for archaeology jobs on shovel bumps, you need the internet to do that. So, and that could be just part of being a digital nomad. Maybe you're not doing anything to actually make a living on the road from a digital standpoint, but you are looking for jobs. And to be honest, yeah, sure, some people are going to be listening to this saying, well, I've never had to go to shovel bums. I always just get called for jobs because I'm amazing and awesome. That's true for some people, but most people have to look for jobs. And typically that's on the internet because it's 2020. The third component to all this, again, I say it's a little subjective because, well, people live how they live, and you can live in any number of ways that you want, but it's an office. What does your office look like? Obviously, there's a lot of van life stuff going around. Vans can be remodeled. You can live in just about anything, but people like vans. Vans can be super expensive. I've seen vans that cost as much as we paid for our RV, and they're vans. It's just ridiculous how expensive they can get. But I've also seen people that just live in their car and they camp out in the desert. They get their per diem and they get their tent and they go pitch it out on BLM land, and they're perfectly happy doing that. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that. And then there's like my wife and I, for the first year that we were truly shovel bumming, when we got rid of our apartment, we were essentially homeless, and we were working project to project to try to get from the southeast to the west, because that was our goal. We lived in hotel rooms. We lived on camping projects. We were back and forth all over the place. And when we were camping, the only internet we had was our phones. And I don't even think we could tether back then. I don't even think tethering was a thing in 2009, 2010, or really 2000, I guess 7 and 8 when we were doing that. I don't remember tethering from a phone being super easy to do, if at all possible.
I think it was extra plans usually. You'd have to pay a premium to be able to do so.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we probably weren't paying that, being, shovel bums. And then when we were in hotels, the hotel Wi-Fi was even worse back then, right? Even worse 12 years ago. So it was really difficult to do much of anything. So nowadays, I'll just give my story. So, obviously we're living in an RV. It's a 36-foot Holiday Rambler vacationer. I've used a couple three different places to actually work from in there, besides like the little living room area, which is actually not very comfortable for me to work in. The dinette, we have it's not one of those U-shaped dinettes. It's got 2 benches on either side. It's actually got this latch underneath it to where, if you release the latch, the whole dinette comes down and somebody could sleep on there if you move the cushions down. Well, the dinette was sitting really high, so I actually pulled the thing off and used my grinder to make a couple other notches so I could lower it just a little bit, and that became a much more effective desk for me. But then again, I don't necessarily want to set my stuff up on the desk all the time. So one thing I was doing when I had my big computers, I sold those actually when we went back to Reno in September, so I don't have those anymore, but I'm going to get another big screen to use. And that made it so I could use the front passenger seat area of the RV because the dash is really big. It's got some flat spots where I could set a monitor and I could use my laptop and then display over to the monitor just because I like screen real estate. But that's only really necessary if you like additional screens. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't sit up there. But it is a nice, comfortable place to sit. There's tons of leg room. The seat moves around like a nice little captain's chair. And then my third option is sitting outside. When it's nice, I've got power out there. I've got a power strip that I run from one of the outside bays and set that on my table. And I've had a couple other camping tables we'd had for years. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't really like those because all camping tables like fold up, and those folding mechanisms typically just get in your way. Like they're X's that are just on all 4 sides on most camping tables. And then your legs, you can't really like truly sit under the table. Well, I found out the secret to getting a nice desk, like camping desk. First off, don't search camping desk because nothing shows up. Search camping dining table. I didn't even know that was a thing. I got one that's like 60 inches long and it's amazing quality. And I think I paid like $120 for this damn thing. And I've only used it once because I just got it last week. But it has no legs underneath it, and the legs are on the sides. And then the top just kind of rolls out accordion style on top of it. Very sturdy, lots of space. I can set up on one side. My wife can set up on the other side. And it's going to be a fantastic desk when we really start using it. Now, Paul, let me tell you what's in our future. And my wife, I'm glad she's not here right now because she smacks me every time I start talking about this. I'm already talking about getting a new RV. And the only reason I'm talking about it is because stop shaking your head. The only reason I'm talking about it, and trust me, this wouldn't happen until like next summer, probably. I mean, we're not going to do anything this fall, but especially because the only ones I've seen of this class in the minimal research I've done so far are actually 2021 models. They go back to like 2016 and 17, but you just can't find that many of them. And the make is the manufacturer is the Thor, Thor. And the type is the Outlaw. And if anybody has seen those fifth wheels that are the toy haulers, the fifth wheel toy haulers where the ramp comes down and you could put like a side-by-side or a four-wheeler up in the back there, or even a small car, those are usually fifth wheels. And we don't have a fifth wheel. We don't have a truck to pull a fifth wheel with. And I don't want to buy an $80,000 truck to pull a $250,000 fifth wheel. So the Thor Outlaw, though, is about a 37 to 40 foot, depending on which one you get, RV that has the toy hauler space in the back. And actually that ramp comes down and you don't have to bring the ramp all the way down. It's got sides that come up to where you can actually make it a patio, like a railed patio. And right next to that space is a set of sliding glass doors that go into the bedroom, the only bedroom with a queen size bed in there. And basically what you have back there, if you're not going to have any toys, because I wouldn't, is you have an office, you have a studio. And that's what I want to put back there. They've got chairs and stuff that you can put back there. And I think I would just take all that out. You can put a bed back there if you want to. I think one of the models has a bed that comes down from the ceiling and just like all these little mods. But I would probably sound insulate it for a podcast studio and also put my desk back there. And then my wife could actually use it for her yarn and design and, knitting studio as well. And that is like a mobile office that would be phenomenal. And then it would serve dual purpose too. If I could manage to put everything on the walls so I could fold them up and get it out of the way. We bought a small car to tow behind our RV. And I'm pretty sure that car would fit in there, just like Knight Rider. Remember Knight Rider? Like I want to drop that ramp while we're going down the highway and just pull the car out. Oh man.
That name gets me. Thor Outlaw. There can't be a more testosterone-driven name than that, can there?
This is what irritates me about some of those, especially the fifth wheels. The fifth wheels are all like adrenaline with, like lightning bolts and shit and just like all these weird things. I'm like, come on. We know who your audience is for this. And typically the Class A RVs don't follow that kind of naming convention. They've got like ambassador and, stuff like that. But just because they made the damn thing a toy hauler, they had to call it the Outlaw. Right. It's like, come on. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's a little go big or go home. And I think, that's probably the top end of what people would do. But if you're going to live in this lifestyle and you're going to make it your thing, I mean, I figure, why not do it right? Because I think we're going to do this for a number of years. We're not tired of it now. I don't foresee getting tired of it in the future. Unless something changed and Rachel got pregnant, we had triplets or something like that. That would be pretty hard to do on an RV. But hey, one kid, I think we would try to make that work. If we had one kid, plenty of people out there having babies and raising families on an RV or even in a small trailer. Oh yeah, doing the whole thing, the homeschooling or Zoom schooling or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, that's what we're all doing forever now anyhow.
Exactly. We've perfected it. Why not just embrace it?
Oh, no, we have not perfected it. You would not believe my mornings every day from 8 until 1:30 or so when I finally get a breathing space of the totally at their wits' end parents and children because something glitched out on Zoom for them. Oh, no, it's not anywhere close to perfected.
Well,
you got some time for that. I mean, at least 9 months.
At least, Jesus. Hopefully 9 months in like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, okay. Kid's going to be really sharp.
Nice. So, Paul, if you were to go full digital nomad, I mean, let's face it, there's a chance you could retire here in not too distant future.
Yeah.
What would you do?
I'm not quite sure because my notion of like being nomadic is different than yours is. You've moved your home base into this mobile home base, and you're trying to figure out how to make that work. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I spent a lot of time as a field archaeologist in my 20s and 30s, and so typically my work was in the Middle East. I would fly. The most expensive part of this whole project of anything was the airfare. So I would fly to Project A and then take a bus, take a flight locally, whatever, to Project B, then to Project C. I would jump around between different projects for a few months on end.
Right.
And I could do that because my specialty in the field was as a surveyor. So I had the total station and the tripod and the prisms and the poles, and I had the computer and the batteries and such. And I was constantly, running joke I would always have was, I have so much portable equipment, I can hardly move. So I'm still actually in the mindset of being nomadic, but still having a home base.
Sure.
Right. So in a different sense than what you're talking about, your home base would move with you. I'm thinking of, my home base is, my most comfortable home base is Brewster because I've got a workbench there. But then doing months long stretches out in the field. I'm gesturing off camera, which is a problem I have all the time. Months long stretches out in the field. And so for me, it would be how to get the right sets of equipment that I could A, do my job, B, be relatively comfortable, but then not be so encumbered by the equipment that it makes the movement difficult. It makes the traveling difficult, or I get overly worried about theft or breakage or loss or things like that. So I'm not quite sure yet how I'm going to balance it. I do know that, it's been 15 years since the last time I had anything like that as a lifestyle. So I do know that now batteries are better, equipment is lighter. I could do that without feeling like I'm roughing it quite in the same sense. But I haven't looked into it closely enough yet to know how I'm going to make it work. And also then for me, there's the added complication that where I'd most like to do that is again back in the Middle East, which may or may not actually be doable in the next few years, especially, again, my Yemen shirt. That's where I would really love to go back to.
Listen, if you could get a Thor Outlaw to Yemen, you could have a workbench back there.
They probably already have them. You would not believe the things that they can build.
I'm sure of it. Yeah. Nice. I'm pretty excited at the prospect of what the future has to bring for digital nomadism. And also 2020 is such a crazy year that I think a lot of people have become sort of digital nomads in the sense that they're no longer at their offices, right? They're traveling, even if that traveling is home and the backyard, right? For a change of scenery, they're trying to figure out, holy crap, my router is no longer adequate for what I was doing, right? Like I'm on stuff all day long and it's just not cutting the bill when the entire family is there. The kids are streaming Netflix or doing their own Zoom classes, and you're trying to have a business call, and you realize that cheap plan that you bundled with your, Spectrum last year just isn't cutting it anymore. Right. And I think 2020 is going to, if you're trying to look for a silver lining, I hope that two things are happening. One, people are starting to increase their usage and connectivity and therefore increase their plans. I mean, not that I want to give the companies more money, but what that will do is cause those internet companies to maybe rethink their infrastructures as well. Just like Zoom had to, right? Zoom had to completely change everything they did in the last 5 months, just so they didn't lose a whole bunch of customers. And they really pivoted hard and did it well, I think. And we're talking right now on Zencastr's video beta. I mean, I think that they've been talking about video for a while, but I think 2020 with the need to really do this just really accelerated that development, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I see a different angle of it. Maybe something in between what you and I do. And this isn't tech nomads in the sense of shovel bums or the what I used to be, the academic archaeologist going around from place to place or things like that. But, I'm sitting right now in New York City, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of articles about the population drain in the richer areas of this city because people had the wherewithal to, in the spring, get out and rent places or buy places up and down the Hudson Valley, out into Connecticut and in the Catskills and so on. And so people moved out, and they initially did so thinking it was just going to be a couple, a month or two. And a lot of people have then figured out how to stay away while they can, because the classes for their kids are going to be remote anyhow. So might as well be remote in the Catskills versus being remote stuck in your apartment building, on the Upper East Side. And it wasn't a planned thing for most of them, but then some have hopped around from one rental to another. I have a few friends that have done that, but they've had to kind of restructure, refigure what mattered to them, what they had to bring with them, what the minimal requirements were especially for internet, because of all the things you were just saying, everybody being online all the time now. So again, I think that archaeologists, we're known for being scavengers, right? We reap the benefits of things that are designed, they're developed, of techniques, of scientific techniques, of computer techniques, of theoretical frameworks, whatever, that are developed in other fields that we figure out how to use ourselves. And I do suspect that because we're not the ones driving the bus with this, that there are a lot of other people, often with a lot more money to spend, to try to make this right for themselves. I think that it's going to circle back around in ways that over the next year and a half or so are going to be able to help us. Despite being a co-host of a technology podcast, I'm a terrible futurist, and I've said that before, how many times I've gotten things wrong. But I do believe that I'm not going to speculate what the form of it's going to be, but I do believe that we're going to have some new, not necessarily even new technologies, though certainly there'll be the technological aspect, but just new ways societally of dealing with people on the move, that it's going to redound upon us. It's going to help us do what we want to do or have to do because of the field that we're in.
That's well said. I think you're totally right. I think the silver lining on 2020 is going to be what we all learn from this and what gets innovated from this. So, because, to be honest, this is going to move straight into 2021. I mean, a lot of states, as we're talking in the end of September here, are hitting they're starting to hit a true second wave. If it's not really truly expressing itself yet, it's going to soon. And I don't know if we're going to ever fully lock down again, because people are just so resistant to that, which means it's going to take forever to kick this thing. If we ever do, like Dr. Fauci said, we might be dealing with COVID-19 for many, many years in cycles that hopefully get less and less and less as we gain more immunity and we come up with vaccines and all those sorts of things. But, the politicians keep talking about vaccines, but it's not a panacea. We've had vaccines for a lot of things people still get, it keeps it down, but it's not going to make it go away. So not to talk about that too much, but again, silver linings, hopefully it allows us to all be more connected while separate, you know what I mean? And get people more used to that connectivity, which will increase the ability for people to become digital nomads, hopefully. So
we'll see.
We'll see.
One way or another, we're going to see.
One way or another. That's right. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. And again, if you want to check out the video for this, hopefully I did my job right and it's down in the show notes. So check that out at archpodnet.com/archaeotech, spelled the right way, ARCHAEOTECH/138. And that should link over to our YouTube channel. If I didn't do that in time, just go over to YouTube and type in Archaeology Podcast Network. We don't have a whole lot of stuff over there, but I'm hoping to get more and more content as we figure out some more of this video stuff. So there we go. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Chris. This was fun. I didn't think I was going to enjoy looking at another screen for another hour and a half or so, but this has been good. Let's hope it looks good when we get it back up on YouTube.
There you go. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Wash your hands.
Thanks for listening to the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to items mentioned on the show are in the show notes at www.archpodnet.com/archaeotech. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com and paul@lugal.com. Support the show by becoming a member at archpodnet.com/members. The music is a song called Off-Road and is license free from Apple. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.